Alright, greetings. Here's our third go at this hill, and we now have a dry hydrocal surface. And here on the sides and on the tops, it's got a nice kind of hard shell on it. And as I said in the previous videos, what this shell will do for us is it adds a little strength to the model. It hides some of the foam texture. The fact that I've got it tinted brown, if flock doesn't get complete coverage, it'll be brown that shows through instead of white or pink. And also, probably one of the most important things I forgot to mention before is it'll act as a primer for the paint, so it really gives something kind of porous, good surface for the paint to adhere to. Alright, so now that we've got this shell, still a little plain in places. So before we paint and flock, there's a little bit more texture that we're going to want to add to it. And one thing I'm going to do is to give this road a kind of coherent path as it climbs up these different pieces of the styrofoam, and to give it a slightly different looking texture from the rest, since it's supposed to be kind of soil, a dirt road. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put kind of a mix of spackling compound and glue all the way up here through the road, and then what I'm going to put in that is some construction sand. I have some of that here, and I like this stuff because it's already got all kinds of little pebbles and such mixed into it. It's not a regular grain. And then we'll also, in select places on the model, add in some of these. This may be ballast. I forgot where I picked this up. It may be woodland scenics. They're just little stones in various shapes, and we'll glue those in some spots, appropriate spots on the model before we paint. All right, so here's my mix here of the spackling compound, and this is about half spackle. This stuff picked up the store, and half of your standard white multi-purpose glue. And I'm just going to use this little trowel here. It's about the right width that I want, and we're just gonna kind of glop it on there. Yeah, it doesn't have to look perfect. So we're going to be flocking around the edges of this, and amazingly, when you paint things, little oopses that you have on the model just kind of disappear. There we go. Oops, sorry about that. Alright, it's getting pretty close to where the tower will be here. I'll take it a little further up. What I may end up doing, since the tower has a stone platform, a stone stair step right before the door, is make this appear like stone here, stone paving here. So I'm not going to take the road all the way up there. I'm making a little bit of a mess there, but like I said, that's okay. Once it's painted and some of the sand and stuff is added, a lot of that stuff just won't be visible. Yeah, let's try to keep it from going over the edges here, though. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with that. Got a little goop there I didn't mean to get there. Let me see if I can get that off. There we go, that's good enough. And I don't want it to look like cake frosting on the edges here, so I'll take my finger and get rid of some of that stuff where I didn't want it to be, really. Yeah, it should be fine. Alright, now we're going to take some of this construction sand. And we're just going to sprinkle it. And some of the little larger pebbles will fall there, and they're not going to stick in necessarily good. I'll push those in just a minute with my finger. I want those guys, though. They'll add some texture and really stand out when it's painted. Okay. Now push some of these little rocks in so that they'll set good. Maybe should clear some of that goop off right there. There we go. That should do it. I'll also probably go over with a thin spray glue to get some of these little pebbles. Make sure they're tightly bound to the model. Alright, that should do that. So there's our road. And other than maybe spraying a very light sealant glue over this before it gets painted, when this dries it should be pretty much ready for painting. Alright, so the other thing that we're going to do to add some texture is that we are going to use some wood glue here, and I may mix it with some water a little bit, and I usually just mix it with a little bit of water. It's a little thick on its own, and just pour some out onto my table, a little clump. This is all on newspaper, so it's easy to get rid of later. And we'll just mix that with a little bit of water. And I'll put it on with a toothpick. Simple tool. Alright, that should do it. Let's get some right here as an example at the base where this little crevice is. One of the places I like to put this rubble is at the seam between the two styrofoam parts. That kind of breaks up the pieces a little bit, makes it look a little more natural. The hill's already a little unnatural looking just because it's for wargaming, so I'm using flat levels so the models can be stood on them. So putting some extra texture in places like that helps to alleviate some of that artificialness. So let's put some small pebbles in here. It's a little bigger than the sand that we were putting in previously. Now I get out a particularly large one and put it in there. I don't want all the same size rocks. I want a mix of some small ones and some of the larger ones. Okay, once I've got that done, I'll actually take some of the construction sand again to get even more variance in the look of it. Put some of the finer sand in there. Let's get a close-up look at that. There we go. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. Now I'll put this in a lot of places on the model, probably inside this crevice, and along the edges periodically all the way around. I'll have some little rubble pieces like this. That's probably about it. I won't put a lot up here because I know I'm going to be putting buildings up here when I'm wargaming, models up here when I'm wargaming, so I don't want a lot of rocks and rubble to take away from the flat surface area up here. Although I may put a little bit isolated rocks or so right on the edges here and there. Alright, and when we come back, we'll take a look at that in the next part. It should be all that extra texture should be done, and it should be ready to paint in the next step.